A 16-year-old boy steps onto the pitch at Ajax. No fear in his eyes. No hesitation in his run. Just 3 days. That's the gap between him and a club legend who debuted before him, a man named Clarence Seedorf. 3 days. That's how close this teenager came to rewriting over 100 years of Ajax history. And here's the part that makes it insane. He wasn't even playing his real position that day. We'll get to that. Because before we talk about records, before we talk about Barcelona, before we talk about a World Cup call-up at 18 years old, we need to talk about a kid nobody outside Belgium had ever heard of. His name is Jorthy Mokio. And right now, across Europe, scouts are whispering his name like it's a secret they're not supposed to share. So who is this kid? Why is Ajax handing him a 5-year contract before he's even old enough to legally drink in most countries? Why did Barcelona send their sporting director, their actual sporting director, to sit in his living room? Something is happening here. Something big. And it didn't start in Amsterdam. It started in a small Belgian city most football fans couldn't find on a map. Picture Ghent. Quiet streets. A modest family. A father who drives a forklift for a living. Not a former pro, not a football name, just a man doing honest work to support his family. A mother raising her son with values that money can't buy. This is not the story of a kid born into football royalty. This is the story of a kid who had to build his own crown. Jorthy didn't even start as a defender. Picture that for a second. The player scouts now call a rock-solid anchor. The kid praised for defending like a wall, spent his early years as a striker. Until he was 14, he was the one scoring goals, not stopping them. Then everything shifted. Coaches move him back. Some kids would have sulked. Some kids would have seen it as a demotion, a punishment, a sign they weren't good enough up front anymore. Jorthy saw something else. He saw a new mountain to climb. And that decision, that one quiet, unglamorous decision, is the reason this story exists at all. But here's where it gets interesting. Nobody handed this kid anything. At K.A. Gent Academy, hundreds of boys walk through those doors every year dreaming the exact same dream. Most of them disappear. Forgotten. Names nobody remembers. The academy system is a meat grinder, and for every Jorthy Mokio, there are 1,000 boys just as hungry who never make out the other side. So why him? Because while other kids were comfortable being good at one thing, Jorthy refused to be one-dimensional. Center back, left back, defensive midfielder. He could slot in anywhere and look like he'd trained there his whole life. Coaches started noticing. It wasn't just coaches. In October 2023, still just a teenager nobody outside Belgium had heard of, he became the youngest player in Gent's history to feature in the UEFA Youth League. A club record, at an age when most boys are worrying about exams. But that's not even the wildest part. 5 months later, on his actual 16th birthday, he became eligible for senior football. And Gent didn't wait. A month after that, they threw him straight into a Belgian Pro League match. Starting lineup, against Standard Liège, one of the biggest fixtures in the country. Gent won 5-1. And just like that, the secret was out. Every big club in Europe suddenly knew the name Jorthy Mokio. Now here's where the tension really builds. Barcelona came calling. Not an agent, not a scout. Barcelona sent their actual sporting director, Deco, to sit down face-to-face with Jorthy's family. Bayern Munich showed interest. PSV showed interest. This wasn't hype. This was one of the most decorated clubs on the planet, looking a 16-year-old in the eyes and saying, "We want you." Imagine that pressure. Imagine being 16 years old and Barcelona, the club of Messi, the club that built Lamine Yamal, is sitting in your house. Most kids would have signed on the spot. Most families would have chased the biggest name without thinking twice. Jorthy's family did something almost nobody expected. They said no, not out of arrogance. Out of wisdom most adults don't even have. His father later explained it simply. They'd watched too many young Belgian talents leap too early into giant clubs, get buried on the bench, and quietly fade away. Going too soon, his father said, is pointless. So while the football world assumed this kid would chase the Barcelona badge like every other teenager dreams of doing, he chose Ajax instead, a club with a history of trusting teenagers when nobody else would. The same pathway that built Matthijs de Ligt. The same pathway that was already building Jorel Hato. But choosing the club was the easy part. Now he actually had to prove it wasn't a mistake. And for a while, it looked shaky. He arrived at Ajax in the summer of 2024, but instead of walking straight into the spotlight, he was sent down to the reserves. Jong Ajax. Second division football. The kind of place dreams quietly die if you don't fight your way out. This is the moment that could have broken him. A kid who turned down Barcelona, now grinding it out in the reserves, wondering if he'd made the wrong call. But then something happened. He didn't sulk. He didn't demand a transfer. He went to work. 17 appearances, goals, assists, and critically, he taught himself a brand new skill almost nobody asked him to learn. He started operating as a defensive midfielder on top of his natural defending. He was quietly building a toolkit no other teenager in that academy had, and Ajax's coaches were watching every single minute of it. Then came the moment nobody saw coming. August 29th, 2024. Europa League playoff. Ajax versus Jagiellonia Białystok. The manager, Francesco Ferrioli, sends on a substitute. 16 years old. 182 days. The youngest non-Dutch player to ever debut for Ajax in the club's entire history. Let that sink in for a second. Ajax, a club that's been producing legends since before either of your grandparents were born. And this kid from a quiet Belgian household just became part of their record books in his very first appearance. But Ajax still wasn't done testing him. He went back to the reserves, built, waited, and then, on February 9th, 2025, Ferrioli threw him into a full Eredivisie start. At left back, not even his best position. 16 years old, 346 days. 3 days older than Clarence Seedorf was, when Seedorf became the youngest player to ever start a league match for Ajax, back in 1992. A record that had survived for over 30 years. Jorthy Mokio came within 3 days of breaking it. 3 days. Now here's where the story stops being about potential and starts being about proof. 4 days after that historic start, Ajax handed him his first European start, full 90 minutes against Union Saint-Gilloise. And in that match, he didn't just play well. He scored. A volley. Cold, clean, and absolutely fearless for a kid his age. That goal made him the youngest player in the history of the UEFA Europa League knockout stage to ever score a goal. 16 years and 350 days old. Think about that for a second. Every club in Europe has academies full of talented kids. Thousands of them, across hundreds of clubs, all dreaming of this exact moment. And out of every single one of them, Jorthy Mokio was the youngest to ever do this on this stage. But Ajax wasn't the only place writing his name in a history. Belgium came calling too. In March 2025, at just 17 years and 19 days old, he made his senior international debut, coming on against Ukraine. One of the youngest players to ever wear the senior Belgium shirt. And by June 2026, he wasn't just making up the numbers in a youth squad anymore. Rudy Garcia, the senior national team manager, called him into Belgium squad for actual World Cup qualifiers. 18 years old. A World Cup campaign. Let that land. But maybe the moment that really tells you everything you need to know happened back in Amsterdam, in a fixture Dutch football fans don't take lightly. The Klassieker. Ajax versus Feyenoord. The biggest rivalry in Dutch football. The kind of match where careers are made or quietly buried under pressure. Jorthy Mokio scored. He became the second youngest goal scorer in the history of the Klassieker in the Eredivisie era. A match this big, a stage this loud, and he didn't shrink. He stepped up. Now here's where it gets crazy. This is a kid who, less than 2 years earlier, was playing in Belgium's second tier with K.A. Gent, completely unknown outside his own country. And now he's scoring in one of the fiercest derbies in European football, with Premier League giants reportedly circling. Manchester United, Newcastle United, Eintracht Frankfurt, all of them watching, all of them wondering if they could be the next club to try and pry him away from Ajax. And in a move that shocked absolutely nobody who'd followed his journey, Jorthy didn't panic, didn't chase the money, didn't jump. His representatives actually rejected contract proposals from Ajax. Not because he wanted to leave, because he knew exactly what he was worth, and he wasn't going to undersell himself just because he's still a teenager. Ajax's technical director, Jordi Cruijff, put it plainly Jorthy is only 18 years old, and he's already played nearly 50 matches for the first team. Across Europe, everyone knows the talent he has. Everyone. That's the word that matters here. Because this isn't a hidden gem anymore. This isn't a rumor passed between scouts and hushed voices. This is a kid who's now impossible to ignore. And in April 2026, Ajax made their answer official. A new 5-year contract, locked in until 2031. Think about what that means. Ajax, a club that sells its best young talents almost every single summer, just bet 5 years of their future on an 18-year-old defensive midfielder who, less than 2 years earlier, was riding the bench in Belgium's second division. Now let's put this in real context, because numbers alone don't capture it. When people talk about generational defenders breaking through young, they talk about Matthijs de Ligt captaining Ajax in the Champions League semi-final at 19. They talk about Jorthy anchoring the back line as a teenager. Jorthy Mokio isn't following that pathway from a distance. He's walking it right now at the same club on the same path. When people talk about teenagers refusing to fear the big stage, they talk about Lamine Yamal walking into Barcelona's first team like it was nothing. Jorthy Mokio had Barcelona walk into his living room, and he was the one who said no. When people talk about defensive monsters who play above their years, you think of the kind of player whose physical numbers simply don't match a normal 18-year-old's body. That's exactly the profile scouts are now attaching to his name. A defender whose physical tools are already playing like a player years older than his passport says. This is the part that should genuinely scare opposing strikers across Europe. He's not even at his physical peak yet. He's not even finished growing into his body. And he's already doing this. So picture the player reaction. Picture Farioli trusting a 16-year-old in a classicer atmosphere most senior professionals find suffocating. Picture his father still driving that forklift, watching his son score against Feyenoord on a television screen, knowing every sacrifice led to this exact moment. Picture his mother, raising him in Amsterdam while his career exploded around her. And picture Jorthy himself, a kid who didn't get rattled by Barcelona's name, didn't get rattled by Ajax's history, didn't get rattled by a World Cup call-up. Calm, composed, like he's been here before, even though he's barely lived 18 years. That composure, that refusal to be impressed by the size of the moment, might be the single rarest trait in football. So where does this go from here? If the trajectory holds, this isn't a kid who plateaus in the Eredivisie. This is a kid who, within 2 or 3 seasons, could be anchoring a Champions League backline for one of the biggest clubs in the world. This is a kid who could be wearing the captain's armband for Belgium one day. This is a kid who could be lining up at a World Cup before he turns 22. And every time someone tries to put a ceiling on him, he's broken straight through it. Youngest at Gent, youngest at Ajax, youngest in Europa League history, nearly the youngest Eredivisie starter ever. A teenager who turned down Barcelona and made Ajax believe enough to commit 5 years to him before he's even reached his physical prime. Nobody believed a kid from a quiet Belgian household, raised by a forklift driver and a determined mother, will be sitting on a 5-year deal at Ajax with the Premier League circling and a World Cup campaign on horizon. Nobody believed it, and he's done anyway. So here's the real question. Not whether he's talented. That part is already settled. The real question is how far this actually goes. Can Jorthy Mokio become the defensive cornerstone of a Belgium golden generation? Can he be the next name we put alongside De Ligt and Hato when we talk about Ajax's greatest academy products? Can this kid, who once said no to Barcelona, end up facing them in a Champions League final wearing someone else's badge entirely? 18 years old, a World Cup qualifier already on his resume, a 5-year contract already signed. The story is just getting started. And if you think this is as big as it gets for Jorthy Mokio, you haven't been paying attention.